Troubleshooting is a skill you have to have. It's extremely, extremely important to be able to identify issues and solve them as quickly as possible. And the only way you're going to solve problems extremely fast is to have a structured approach in place that you can follow each and every single time to make sure that you maximize your troubleshooting. And you might say, well, having that structured approach might take me longer to troubleshoot. Well, okay, in some scenarios, it might take you a little longer, but in other scenarios, you'll be very, very fast. So your goal when it comes to troubleshooting is to average out your speed. If you can be extremely, extremely efficient with your troubleshooting through consistency, then over the long term, you're going to be a relatively fast troubleshooter. Whereas others who don't have a structured process in place, they might troubleshoot this way one time, troubleshoot this way the other time, and then go back to this way and that way. And because they pick the wrong method each and every single time, what happens to them? Yeah, they always pick the long way to troubleshoot. So then their average of time for troubleshooting over the long term is unacceptable. So we have here some guiding principles. So basically different phases of the troubleshooting process. First and foremost, you're going to define the problem. You have to define it. You have to verify the problem exists, maybe through a simple ping, a trace route. So you have a user that complains, you can't get to the internet. Fine. Let's go ahead and test it out. Let's see what's going on. But then you have to gather information after that. You have to gather it. So how are you going to gather that information? Well, there's tons of different ways to gather information. You can issue show commands. You can ping trace route, use some other tools to gather statistics. You can interview the user that's having the problem. So you're gathering as much information as possible. After you gather the information, you analyze all the information. And while you're analyzing that information, your ultimate goal at that point in time is to do what? Well, your ultimate goal is to start eliminating some of those potential causes. Right? So we are analyzing the output to say, well, it's not going to be this. It's not going to be that. It's not going to be that either that's causing a problem, or this or that, because the symptoms we have in this particular problem, well, those symptoms wouldn't exist if it was X, Y, Z that was causing the problem. So we can throw all those out. So as we're eliminating all those potential reasons that could be the problem that aren't actually the problem, then we can go on and propose a hypothesis. So our goal is to ultimately come up with one final single item on our list that says, yeah, this is the problem, or the reason why we have the problem. So this is the reason why we have the problem. So now we're going to go ahead and test that. And we test it by implementing a solution, and we see if it works. If it doesn't work, well, back to the drawing board. But if it does work, we solve the problem, and we're going to go ahead and document our solution at that point in time. But you can see here that at any point in time in this troubleshooting process, we can go back. We can move back to somewhere else. So notice here that we were gathering information. Well, we could have jumped down and proposing a hypothesis if we wanted to. Could have done that. Right? Why might we want to do that? Well, what we can do is we can shoot from the hip if we want to. That's an accelerated method of troubleshooting. So I've gathered my information, and based on the information I've gathered, I already know, okay, this is the problem. I really feel this is the problem. So then we go ahead and we test. And if we were right, we're done. But if we're not right, then we got to go back to gathering information. So we are jumping to conclusions, as you might say. But in most of the time, if you're shooting from the hip and you're very confident about your shooting from the hip, well, you'll be right most of the time. But here's something. If you have a database put in place and you track all your problems in your organization and all the solutions to those problems, and that database is a searchable database, well, once you know a problem, then you can go to that database. Right? You're gathering your information. You're like, oh, this sounds like a problem we had a long time ago. You go to the database, punch in some information, it pops up. Yeah, look, we did have this problem before. So I'm going to propose my hypothesis based on that database of information. The repository of problems and issues that we've had and the solutions that we use. So propose my hypothesis based on the database, test the hypothesis. We were right. We move on from there. So shooting from the hip becomes much, much easier if you document absolutely every single problem and solution that you've ever had in your organization. But as we look back here and we move down through our output, our troubleshooting steps, as we're analyzing our information and then eliminating causes and then proposing our hypothesis. Well, if we propose a hypothesis and we realize we just don't have enough information or we didn't analyze the information properly, well, we could go back to analyzing information. Right? We're not stuck at that point in time. If we're proposing a hypothesis and we realize this is just not working as it should, well, then it is what it is. Right? We have to go back and analyze even more. But when we're in the analysis phase, we could jump down to the proposing a hypothesis phase. So if we're analyzing the information, we're like, oh, yeah, I know exactly what this is based on what we have now. Propose a hypothesis. Essentially, you're not really skipping the elimination phase because you've just eliminated absolutely everything else by jumping near hypothesis at that point in time. And then once you test, well, if you're right or wrong, if you're wrong, you go back up to gathering more information to figure out why you were wrong. And let's try and solve it properly this time. So always have a structured plan in place, because that structured plan is going to allow you to walk through it. But eventually, the key to all troubleshooting is the elimination phase. It's really what it boils down to. And why do I say the key is the elimination phase? Well, as you gather and analyze the information, you, with your skills and your knowledge and your expertise, have the ability to narrow down absolutely that problem to a specific cause. Without the knowledge, without your expertise, this phase becomes very difficult. So that whole point of elimination is your expertise coming into play. So you've defined the problem, you've verified it, you gathered information, you're analyzing, and now based on your knowledge, everything you've worked so hard to achieve, you now say, well, it's not this, not this, not this, not this, not this, not this, not this that's causing the problem. Therefore, whatever remains is the reason why I'm proposing my hypothesis based on what is remaining. So that's really why that is the key. And it's you and your ability to understand the topics, concept, technologies, how they work, how they function, how they talk to each other, how you interact with them. That's this key right there. That's all about you, your skills. And that's why you're here, gathering the skills you need. So that way there, when it comes time to troubleshoot, you will be an expert.